Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, a place where we demystify complex technologies every day and provide real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping entire industries. But we do all this in a language that everyone can understand. And today I'm incredibly excited to be talking to Paolo Ardoino, CTO of Bitfinex and Tether. And once again, we're going to try to demystify complex technologies in an aim to increase adoption and also allow everyone to think bigger when it comes to blockchain and crypto. So, quick warning before we dive in, we're not going to be talking about moonshots and Lambos today, but we're going to be discussing how Bitfinex and Tether's actions for financial freedom might influence the rest of the world and in a fight for innovation through governmental, corporate, individual and technological tracks. But also talk about the Plan B forum, explore the new digital economy, and Keat, the peer-to-peer chat application. And finally, dare you to imagine a world of IT without any infrastructure or reliance on the cloud. It's a good one, this. So buckle up and hold on tight, because I'm going to beam your ears all the way to Switzerland, where Paolo is waiting to share his story. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Paolo. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Thank you very much, Neil. So I'm Paolo Ardoino. I'm CTO at Bitfinex and Tether. So I'm basically a developer, right? So I've been developing all my life since a really young age. I was 8 years old the first time I wrote a line of code. And that's the thing that I like to do continuously most of my life, right? So it feels like the thing that I'm fairly good at. And, it's a way to me to express creativity, throughout my life. It's a way to solve problems, right? So that's me.
Awesome. And of course, today it's all about blockchain, crypto, NFTs, etc. But I'd love to take you back in time for a moment, because you mentioned you wrote your first line of code when I think you said you was 8 years old there. So can you remember where that passion for tech came from and that moment that would ultimately put you on the path you're on today and ultimately share your origin story with us?
Sure. So I've been always a curious kid, and also I couldn't, sit still, right? So I had I was really an excited kid all the time. And so my parents are farmers. So we had a small place in Italy, right? Where I grew they were farming sage, rosemary, olives. And, it happens that when you are a young kid, we were not in town, right? So we were outside of town. So I could not meet with my friends after school, right? So I had a lot of time to spend alone. And that time was spent, I was reading a lot. I was reading sci-fi, was really a fan of that already. And then my father started buying, the Spectrum, the Amiga, and then the Commodore. And, I could play games, and I in fact did play some games, but it was boring pretty quickly, right? Because I didn't have no one with whom I could play games. My brother was older than me, and then started to look at how I could create my own game. So the first code that I created was actually how can I create my own game? Like, was a text game. Right? It was like the ones like where you are in a cave, you have to say go north or go east, go west, grab the sword, kill the orc, and all that stuff, right? So it was a really simple game, but it made me understand that new words can be created through code, right? So code is a way to create new physics, to create new words, and that's what I loved. And so this passion kept growing. I got the first 286 processor pretty early on. I remember that my father came one day at home and said, we were definitely not a rich company. So basically for him was 3 salaries, that computer. And so he expressed how much was important. He knew how much I love to break things. And, in terms of like hacking through the things. And he really expressed the fact that I should be extremely careful with that piece of machinery, because that was extremely expensive and he couldn't afford to repair it or buy another one, right? But then I started to learn more and more about computers. I actually started using Linux also pretty soon. It was 94, 95. And definitely I stick to Linux as my only operating system almost since then. And I got also internet pretty early. In Italy, internet wasn't actually a thing, but I was able to get the 16.6 kilobit per second modem, the first one, that the 28.8, 36, and then got the 56 and 64 then. And so I got like all this history and trying to actually get on the internet and enjoying like few kilobit per second more, every year or so. That was like, felt like, okay, we are living the future when I went from, 28 to 56 kilobit per second, right? So it was like, okay, and now seems nothing, but was exciting as a kid because I was, really curious. And I love the fact that on internet, I could find everything already, right? It was pretty early on for internet. But, I could see like one of the, well, now is easy to be said, but it felt already like something, the future, right? Like as a kid that like sci-fi. And I was fan of, for example, Johnny Mnemonic was a movie that was going around in 95, I think. Was super excited, right? So the guy that runs around with that transport data through his memory, that gets like the memory increased with some certain implants. So that actually, this type of movies, books really made me growing even more excited about tech and creating. So actually, the way I experienced these books, and from Asimov to again these movies, was actually they are all, or at least a good part of them, are in a post-apocalyptic world, or like in a world where there are wars, that nothing is as we have today or as we are used to, right? So that actually made me realize that when you build software, when you create something, you shouldn't create a weak system. You should focus on creating something that resists to the wrath of God, right? Something that can resist to the worst apocalypse and keeps running, keeps working. That's, to me, like the power of software. Something that becomes so strong and can be so decentralized, so atomic, that can keep working even the worst case scenario that can happen in this world, right? So that passion for those movies and books really drove me into helped me to understand how to develop software actually really deeply. And then went to the computer science university, math applied to computer science actually. And then I graduated there. I started working as a researcher for the university. I got to work in one of the most interesting projects I ever worked in. And that really teach me a lot again. That was, and really connects to what I was just saying. So I participated we were just few developers. I was one of the developers to develop this communication system for battlefields. So you have to imagine that you are in a battlefield. You don't have like the nice 5G connections that we have today, right? So how data can hop from different cars or like machinery that you have in the battlefield and reliably get to all the destinations, right? So that was really complex approach to actually distribution and communication that really proved helpful in thinking about what we are doing today, as in Keat and Hole Punch, this new technology that we have just pushed out, this like peer-to-peer communication system, internet layer that is powering few of the products that we just launched. So then, as always happens in Italy, if you are a developer, you you don't make really money, right? So, it's the salaries in Italy are extremely low for developers. And so I thought, okay, let's try something different. I went first I had just an internship in Switzerland to build the software for an hedge fund and a portfolio management software for an hedge fund in Switzerland. So I learned a lot about finance, and then thought that I could bring that expertise to London and create my own startup, which I did. So I went to London for 5 years, stayed there, built my startup. But also Bitfinex happened. So I met Giancarlo, my business partner in Bitfinex, and we at that time, Bitfinex had issues in scalability, right? It was already a popular Bitcoin exchange. So he asked me if I could help. He saw my software. I saw my platform that I developed with my own startup. So he asked me, can you come and help to improve the performance of our matching engine? And so I did. But first I had only 1 hour per week. Then it became like 10 hours per week, 20, 40. Now I don't even count them. But when I joined the Bitfinex matching engine, that is the core part that takes the order from the seller and the buyer and matches them, right? The one that they had in the platform was able to do 10 orders per second to 50 orders per second. Now the version that after a few years of iteration, I'm still a core developer of that piece of software, and now it's like 1 million orders per second. So the scalability is has grown insanely. And then in 2016, I was asked to become the CTO of Bitfinex. And then in 2017, I became the CTO of Tether. So this is basically my story.
Wow, what an incredible story. And we must be of a similar age. I was getting so many tech flashbacks there, especially around the text-based adventures. And I clearly remember, even to this day, saying things like, or writing things like prize lock, open gate, enter tavern. Anyone from that age will remember phrases like that. And of course, then onto the modem and the connections there. And it's such a million miles away from where we are now. And as you said, that path led you to Bitfinex. So the big question really for people listening all over the world is, what would you say distinguishes Bitfinex from other exchanges out there? And how do you define yourself as a supporter of the new digital economy? Because that's where the magic's happening right now, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think that with Bitfinex, when I joined Bitfinex, right? So Bitfinex was one huge monolithic piece of code. And one of the books that really opened my eyes when I was young is called The Cathedral and Bazaar from Eric S. Raymond. Mm-hmm. It basically teaches you about how you should design software. That book was about the kernel of Linux and compared to like microservice based approaches and so on. But basically the general idea is that you can build software that is extremely monolithic. So is like a really complex architecture, is from the outside looks beautiful, like a cathedral, right? So cathedrals are beautiful, but try to change a piece in a cathedral, right? So try to adapt it. It doesn't work, right? So building cathedrals take a ton of time, requires a lot of energy, and they cannot be changed. If you try to change something, everything falls apart. On the other side, you have bazaars. They look ugly from the side. They look confusing more than ugly. From the outside, they look, they are more simple, but they are made by people, right? They are made by small parts that all move around like in a crazy order, still orderly because they do specific functions. They sell spices, they sell, vegetables, whatever, right? So, and you have people running around buying stuff and so on, but everything in the end, although at the first look might feel unorganized and confusing, it's actually well organized. And things in a bazaar can keep changing, right? New shops come and go. They grow, they shrink, and so on. And so that you can apply this methodology to softwares, right? So the good comparison is like monolithic architectures compared to microservices. And so when I joined, Bitfinex was consistent in one single repository of all the code and one single huge application. And now, fast forward 8 years, something like that. Yeah, 8 years. It's around. So I took that and I split it in 600 different microservices. So now, whatever happens, if one goes down, the others don't, and so on, there is always this huge like network of microservices that are fulfilling all the operations of our platform. And why this is really important, because in 2020, there was the 12 and 13 March of 2020, I'm sure you recall that, was the moment in which Trump decided to close the inbound flights to US due to COVID. The entire stock market, the crypto market, everything crashed like 50% in a few hours. So all the crypto exchanges were down, right? So they couldn't operate. Bitfinex was actually the only one that was able to operate, right? Was able to fulfill customer orders without any problems, right? Everyone was excited because like Coinbase, BitMEX, that was the biggest derivative exchange back then, they were all down. Bitfinex was there doing its job as nothing happened. And so the reason why that is important, that is distinguishing Bitfinex from the others, is as I said, I'm used to create software that is resistant to the wrath of God. So whatever happens, that thing has to operate, right? You have to think about when you write code, you have to write code that you know that you don't need to change it and is sustainable and is modular enough so you don't need to change it or adjust it for years. That thing will keep going. Our matching engine is like one process. We don't need to, we update it probably once every 1 or 2 years because it's well designed. It does what it needs to do, is extremely efficient. So that's what I like when I build architectures.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And one of the things I always try and do on this tech podcast is demystify some of the complex technologies out there to try and increase adoption and better understanding of what's happening in the space. And we will have some people listening outside of the crypto space, and their only knowledge will be of the big craziness that happened in 2017, the market volatility and the crypto winter and all those kind of things. But they don't understand what problems it can solve. So can you expand on how the spreading crypto adoption in emerging markets can actually help combat financial inequalities for one thing?
All right, that is my preferred topic because Bitfinex and Tether have been always companies that had at heart the ethos of this industry, right? So one of the scariest things of technology and an industry is losing touch with the reason of why this entire movement started. So this entire movement started in 2008. So with the Satoshi white paper was published the 31st of October 2008. The first Bitcoin block was mined January 3, 2009. So in the first block, you can add some metadata to the block. In the first block, you could clearly see there was written a reference to the 2007-2008 financial crisis. So the Bitcoin story started because as a response to the bad management of global finance, where it feels it's really easy, to say this, but obvious, but where we have few big countries, nations, and few big banks that keeps making more money, keep having more and more control, while there are nowadays around 2 billion people in the world that don't have access to banking services, not even basic financial services. And not because they are bad people, right? Though they cannot do that. They cannot have a bank account because having a bank account is too expensive for them, right? So we're used to Europe where, maybe keeping open a bank account is, 20, 50 euros or GBP per year. But that is a lot of money, right? So is $34 per month might be, 10% of what certain people earn and live with during the month. So you cannot expect that the cost of, and of course, banks needs to work on a global regulatory framework, right? So banks, even in distress and emerging countries, have to have the same exact infrastructure and cost that the other banks in more, let's say, in richer countries have. That's why basically the access of banking, basic financial services is extremely limited in emerging markets. And on the other side, you have the other reason why banking is extremely expensive is that I've been working with banks for quite some time in the first part of my financial development career. And I can tell you that all the banking infrastructure is kept together by rubber bands. Is COBOL, is all a patchwork of tens of the technologies that are extremely inefficient. So they need a ton of engineers to keep everything barely working. And so if you look at, the website, the platform of HSBC, that is one of the biggest banks in the world, that it feels like even today, the website of a website made in 2002, right? So it's like this stuff is not really, so banking infrastructure and software is not keeping up with the modern times, and that keeps adding overall costs to the end user, because these costs are reflected to the end user. So the thing that I like about Bitfinex is that we are really following the Bitcoin ethos. We are looking at all those countries, and we are looking at we want to build services that disintermediate, that are based on modern technology, so that we can offer cheap services to the people that don't have actual access to basic financial services. So we don't plan to, overtake European or US banks. That's not our role, right? There is so much space. There are these billions of people that have this issue. So we want to focus. Actually, our business model with both Bitfinex and Tether is filling the gap that has been left open for decades by the banks. That's it.
I think this is a great point to highlight here as well, because before you came on the podcast, I was doing a little research on you, and I quickly learned that Tether is launching a conference in Lugano at the end of the month, the Plan B Forum, that will highlight mostly financial freedom and access to financial services in emerging markets and everywhere. And on top of that, Bitfinex is also participating in adopting Bitcoin in El Salvador in November. Again, all these things seem to converge for me. So can you tell me a little bit more about how Bitfinex and Tether's actions for financial freedom could actually go on to influence the rest of the world and just increase that fight for innovation through governmental, corporate, individual and technological tracks?
Bitfinex will be present in adopting Bitcoin in El Salvador. Yeah. For multiple reasons, right? So with Bitfinex, we created this platform called Bitfinex Securities. That is a platform that aims to help private companies and even governments to raise capital, reducing the intermediaries, right? So we have all this. So everything that we do has the same underlying ethos. So if you are a startup in Silicon Valley, you want to raise $5 million, you can do that, even with the most obvious and basic idea, you find money, right? So it's really easy for you. But if you have the very same idea and you are in Turkey or you are in Argentina, that is 100 times more difficult, right? So access to capital is extremely difficult if you are not in the US or you are not in Europe or you are not in Singapore or Hong Kong. So but that isn't fair, right? So we cannot expect to have, financial inclusion. We cannot expect to have a more even playing field without proper access to funding. So the reason why on creating Bitfinex Securities was actually, okay, let's create a platform that allows security tokens. So stocks, bonds are security tokens. So the idea was let's allow private companies and governments to actually tap into this platform, so that we can put together crypto investors and the companies that want to raise capital. So that to me is although it's not Bitcoin, it's still continuing on the Bitcoin ethos, where we try to remove, if you try to raise capital as a company, normally you would have to go through roadshows and have multiple intermediaries, and every one of these will ask you for a fee and a hefty fee. But if we can remove the majority of them, then basically everything, all the process gets streamlined. And still keep in mind that the crypto industry is like $1 or $2 trillion industry. It was $3 trillion at its peak. So there is a lot of capital in this industry that could be, instead of putting it on things like Shiba Inu or Dogecoin, like meme coins, it's much better if this money gets to actual companies that can create something in their home countries, and they can create actual value. And so with this platform, we came to connect to the El Salvador government, and they needed a platform where they wanted to raise a $1 billion for their Vulcano token. So that the Vulcano token is similar to a bond in a certain sense. So has certain, like as a dividend, as an interest, as a coupon, and certain disclosures to on how the money that the government will raise will be used for. And a part that is extremely interesting, the approach, right? This is the first time in history that a government raised capital through a mean that is not the top banks in the world or the IMF, right? Again, this goes towards the financial freedom. So we have seen so many times in the history how lending money between countries has led to colonialism, basically, in a simple word. So a country that wants to try something different is a country to praise, right? So they want to do something different. They want to try to appeal to a different audience and raise capital in that way. So that's the thing that excites us, right? So we like to see bold progress, and I love the fact that they are leveraging the popularity, they are leveraging the message that Bitcoin is giving to try in this brave enterprise.
And also, for anyone listening outside this space, can you just tell me a little bit more about Plan B, what Plan B is, and more about your involvement with it, and what's next for Bitcoin in your eyes?
So the Plan B is an initiative that Tether and the city of Lugano started. To me is extremely interesting, right? So I talk a lot about emerging markets, but I don't forget that Bitcoin is for everyone, right? So, of course, El Salvador, for example, and Switzerland are two widely different countries, right? So Switzerland is the country of banks, is the country of money, is the country of safety, right? So El Salvador instead is an emerging market, is the developing country. So El Salvador is not rich. So I like to try to use Bitcoin into different scenarios. On one side, you have Bitcoin being used by a country like El Salvador as a way to provide access to financial services to all the people that they don't have access to financial services. On the other side, you have Switzerland, you have Lugano, where Bitcoin, if the merchants were to accept Bitcoin in Lugano, they could attract another audience that have money to spend. They could be even wealthy people that want to spend money, maybe buying watches, rent a car, whatever, right? Buying groceries and pay insurance. Everything can be paid in Bitcoin. Almost everything can be paid in Bitcoin nowadays. So streamlining that process. Again, the reason of the Plan B was that usually what happens when you go in a city, only few merchants, the ones that are more, they are younger, they are more looking towards new technologies, are actually looking for accepting Bitcoin as a payment system because they understand that it doesn't cost much, and basically they can open to a new audience. But the problem is that this doesn't work for two reasons. On one side, they are just few merchants that understand this because it's about education, right? So it's about teaching, explaining why this is important. So not all the merchants have the time, the skills, and the basic education to understand what is Bitcoin, how to prevent or protect themselves from volatility. There are solutions and so on, right? So you end up in a situation where there are just few merchants in the city that accept Bitcoin, and only so they can make more money. And on the other side, you have the, let's say, customers coming to a city and they don't find the adoption good enough. So, they cannot spend their Bitcoin. So the way we approached this topic was scientific. What if instead we organize events, we organize educational panels for merchants, and actually we provide the entire infrastructure. So this Plan B Foundation will provide the entire infrastructure with the point of sales, with the cashiers and so on, to all the merchants, with no difference, so that everyone is on an even playing field. So again, even in Switzerland, that is the place of banks, we didn't want to create a imbalance. So we wanted to have inclusion. In this case, it's not financial inclusion in terms of who has more money, has more chances to accept Bitcoin, but is actually who has in Switzerland, even in Switzerland, is who has more education, who is younger, has more chances to accept new currencies like Bitcoin. But that isn't fair, right? So you need to be able, so the lady in the grocery store that is 60 years old has to be able to have the same opportunities as the young kid that opened his shoe store that is 30 years old, right? So we wanted to have this story where everyone has access to the same technology that is streamlined, that is simple to use, and so on.
And I would say that there'll be a lot of people listening to this podcast that we've done a great job of giving them an overview of where we are now, where you're heading to. But we're also going to have a few people listening from your community who are probably hoping for a few teasers at the end of the interview. So my big question to you to finish on today is, what is your mission? What major milestones have you achieved this year? And what can we expect in the future from Bitfinex and Tether, indeed?
My mission, my personal mission and my team's mission is freedom, right? So it can be, so I'm sustaining this concept of individual sovereignty, right? So I'm not talking about anarchy, of course. We are living in society, so it's important to be a fully functional member of society. But at the same time, we also need our own individuality. And so freedom and privacy are extremely important, right? So privacy is one of the most forgotten rights, human rights, and freedom is being eroded by the day. So to get to the individual sovereignty, you need two things: the financial freedom, that is what Bitcoin is for, but also you need freedom of speech. If you don't have freedom of speech, your financial freedom is worthless, right? So, and if you have only basically freedom of speech, but you don't have money, or you don't have the ability to retain control over your own wealth, that is still a problem, right? You need the two things together in order to be an individual, to have individual sovereignty. And, that is to me key for, protecting the future of mankind in a certain sense, right? So we started, of course, with Bitcoin and the financial freedom, but recently we released a project called Keet.io, Keet.io, and is a peer-to-peer video chat application, right? So I think that is one of the most, probably is the most brilliant piece of software that has been recently released for multiple reasons. So I've been working on this project for the last 5 years with a team of developers, good friend Matthias Booth and others. And so the concept there is that as part of my career, I study a lot file sharing networks like BitTorrent, right? And I remember all the story of file sharing applications. There was Nutella, there was LimeWire, there was many of them. Yeah. They were all shut down because they were centralized. BitTorrent was the only thing that wasn't centralized. And I keeping that concept in the back of my mind. But what if, so BitTorrent was for file sharing, right? So you would, share files, and was using two technologies. One was the DHT, distributed hash table. The second one was the swarming. So that is the concept where the more people have a file, the faster it gets for others to download it, right? So, And the third thing was hole punching. Hole punching is a technique that allows two computers behind firewalls to establish a direct connection without passing through third-party servers. So we have this concept in the back of our minds. And what if we can take BitTorrent technology, we can adapt it, we can improve it, and we use it not just for static files, but also for continuous data streams. So everything. So this podcast, everything that we do in our day-to-day life with computers and connected to internet is live data streams. So trading signals is live data streams. Watching YouTube is live data streams and so on, right? So what if we could leverage that technology? And so we created this platform, this SDK, software development kit, called Hole Punch, that is a peer-to-peer network, like exactly BitTorrent. In BitTorrent, using the DHT and swarming and so on, is a network, but it's not like a global state network. It's just peer-to-peer. So I connect to you, I'm just connecting to you, not to a huge network that then routes the traffic to you, right? So that is really most important concept, because scalability can only happen if there is a peer-to-peer connection, right? We have been taught to think that cloud is our friend, right? That is like that nice friend that helps us to store and back up our stuff. But it ended up that cloud is that thing that is eating everything that they give, is indexing it and using it to make the big tech companies make money, right? So, and the biggest lie ever is that in order for us to do a communication, right, or to chat, right now we are on Zoom, we need to pass through third-party servers. That's the biggest lie to me, because we are going to Mars as humanity, right? So we are going everywhere. And yet we think that with all the technology, with all the internet infrastructure, in order for me and you to speak, we need to pass through someone else's server. So that's actually not true. And BitTorrent proved that you could have 10 million nodes. The peak was actually 20 million nodes in BitTorrent. They can share petabyte of file of data per day without any central server. But still, we think that, okay, in order to have a Zoom call, we need to have passed through Zoom central servers. And so with this thing in mind, we created this Hole Punch framework that is in a software development kit that is capable to do all the things that BitTorrent is able to do, but for a live data stream. So, and to prove the concept, we created this kit platform that is a Zoom replacement, Zoom Telegram replacement. It was launched two months ago. It's still early stages, but it's already super stable. It's not yet available for mobile, but we are going to launch the mobile version in 1 month or so. And we can have a higher quality video call compared to Zoom, because our traffic doesn't pass through central servers. And the audio is better, the video is better. And you know what? Since let me give you an example. So the user UX is incredible, right? It's much easier, is really polished already. And you feel the freedom already. Everything is encrypted, no question asked, right? So because in peer-to-peer, everything starts encrypted by default. And so here's the thing, right? So we can do chats with we are launching soon the big chats. We can already do calls with 25 people and video calls with 25 people and work perfectly. And there is a nice chat inside, right? But the actual brilliant part of the chat, right? So think about this. You are in a Zoom call with your friends and you drop a 3 gigabyte video. You cannot, because Zoom is limiting to 100 megabytes. But let's say that you could. The data from your computer, as soon as you drop the file in the chat, the video in the chat, the video gets uploaded to Zoom servers, and then people can all download it on their computers, right? But with the kit, it's different. So you drop it in the chat and it stays with you, but people can, so all your peers, right? So all the people in the chat can start downloading chunks of the video immediately, like in BitTorrent. In BitTorrent, if you remember, you could start downloading different chunks of the file, and so you could start, and it was from the people that had that part. But so with Keith, basically, as soon as I drop something in the chat, you can start downloading chunks from me directly. And so you can start streaming the file immediately, the video immediately. Wow. And then you move the slider. Let's say this is a 3 hours long video. You can move the slider, and at any point in time, the system starts getting the chunks of the point in time you move the slider to. And so if there are more people in the chat and start downloading it and getting the chunks from you, then the faster it gets. So it actually is the basic for real-time streaming to millions of people. Because if I stream something from my Kit application, then let's say that I have the first 10 viewers start getting it as well, and they can start streaming the chunks to other 100 people, and goes in this way, exactly as BitTorrent, right? So that's the power of what we are building, and is all will be fully open source by the next end of this year or beginning of next year. So that is, to me, the biggest danger to the cloud industry, because to replicate, one thing that I don't like is that nowadays brilliant developers cannot afford to create groundbreaking applications because it would cost too much in infrastructure, because they know that they need to raise, either they are good in raising money with VCs, or no one can build another zoo because extremely expensive, right? But with Kit, we just demonstrated that one single front-end developer could build an entire video chat and text chat application in 6 months. Wow. Because everything else is solved by the hole punch infrastructure, all the peer-to-peer networks. So decentralized file storage, peer-to-peer connections, everything, encryption is all solved by this framework. Just to be clear, there is no token, there is nothing inside. So there is no cost. Everyone now can start building on that software layer without any boundaries, and can build applications like distributed VPNs, can build peer-to-peer chat applications with the highest quality, with the best user experience, but without any cost of infrastructure. So to me, the future of internet is this one.
Wow, you've just literally blew my mind there. And first of all, I'm thinking, why didn't we record today's episode using this? But I think maybe we will need to get you back on next year, and we will record using that platform.
Absolutely.
That sounds phenomenal.
So we are adding the ability to record and connecting to the different recording software studio software. So, but that should come out in the next 2 months. And so that we are also adding the live streaming to millions of people. Right now it's more for chats, but we are adding also the full live stream so that you can actually stream to millions of people from your Raspberry Pi if you want.
Well, we will be getting you back on next year to try that out. Absolutely. But before I let you go, we started the podcast talking about your origin story, what put you on this path, how it began with you writing those lines of code at just 8 years old. But as we come full circle, I'm now going to ask you to leave everyone listening on another note of inspiration, and that is there a song that has inspired you or helps you get your head in the zone when coding that we can add to our Spotify playlist, or a book that you could recommend that we could add to our Amazon wish list? All I'm going to ask is what you're going to leave us with today and why.
I'm a big metal fan.
Yeah,
cool. So the song, my preferred band is Metallica, although I listen to almost all metal and hard rock. So I would say as a song, I always code better with metal, and especially one album that is S&M2 of Metallica. If I have to choose a song, would be Master of Puppets from Metallica. Yeah. And as a book, I strongly recommend The Cathedral and Bazaar of Eric S. Raymond. If I have to choose another one, more fantasy-oriented, would be the Cycle of the Foundations of Asimov.
Awesome. Well, I'll add both those books to the Amazon wish list, and I will be rocking out to Master of Puppets Metallica, and that's going straight on the Spotify playlist. Now, I am conscious, though, we've covered a lot of ground today, from Bitfinex to Tether and the new platform you were talking about there. So what is the best starting point to find out information about anything we talked about today, and equally join your community or stay in touch with a member of your team? What's the best starting point for everything?
So you can follow on Twitter at Bitfinex, and myself at Paolo Ardoino, so name, surname. And you should visit keet.io, keet.io, and you will not regret it.
Well, I'm going to be checking out Keet as soon as we finish this podcast. You've really opened my eyes up to the potential there, and I love how you've took the BitTorrent technology and it's evolving before our eyes. So it's fantastic what you've created there. But before, more than anything, just a big thank you for coming on the podcast today, and I look forward to getting you back on next year. But thanks for sharing your story with me today.
Thank you very much, Neil. It was really a pleasure.
As I always say on this podcast, my aim is to prove technology works best when it brings people together, and also demystify technologies. Talk about it in a language that everyone can understand, or as they say on Reddit, hey, explain it to me like I'm 5. And listening to Paolo there, consider my mind blown, because as I walk away from